It's the wrong dossier. I wanted to discuss with you what I am really meaning when I use the term walk on the wide path, or view or perceive all pathways at once. And this works on a psychic level as far as its manifestation goes with respect to channeling into the underlying forces or underlying intentions, as I've been calling it. But it's also through your own experience that you will inevitably be attempting to procure conclusions. And when you procure those conclusions, it's important to remember a few things. As opposed to looking out at your experiences through the limited perception of one schematic or template that someone taught you or you read in a book somewhere, it might be good if you look out at your experiences as simply an extension of you, through you. Because it's basically the same thing. What's occurring out there is the same thing as what is occurring inside of you, or at least the way you're perceiving it to be occurring or taking place within your own thoughts. It's the same. It's the same. You want to be allowing for your inner self to take note of all that's happening so that you can assimilate that data into the overall pattern that the underlying intention, which has always been there, is trying to show you. Now, that faulty template that you might be using will have a tendency to dictate which cause has which effect with respect to the way that you are coming to your conclusions from your perceptive experience. It's basically just another form of mind control when that's happening. But once you truly start to understand what I'm talking about, you'll realize that the underlying intention that intends against you can manifest in many different forms. A person's eyes, a person's words, or even a gust of wind. But once you start to understand it and feel it, you won't even need to have your eyes open. But of course, let's not forget, hopefully you understand this, and you've collected this much from your own experiences. You are going to spend the greatest portion of your day under some form of mind control or another. Whether it's passively stemming from a TV advert that is running in a shop as you walk past it, or whether it is aggressive, like the kind that some demons will employ. Again, if you've listened to my other recordings, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say demons. I'm not talking about some guy with horns and a tail who exists in the pits of hell and is colored red, or whatever preconceived notion you have in your mind. Don't get caught up between the notions of heaven and hell, or any symbol for that matter that you've been spoon-fed since birth. Those are all just trap doors. And your ego is just waiting to fall in. So with respect to this teacher's template that I was mentioning before, I got a little bit off topic, but it's important that you remember when you go out and you experience, you don't want to be looking for those conclusions. And I know I've mentioned this before in another video, and that's what I'm trying to do, is expand on that right now, just to make sure that the information I'm trying to convey to you is not tainted. I mentioned before that you don't want to be looking for symbols. You don't want to go out and look for symbols, or look for this or look for that. At least not symbols that someone else has told you about. What you want to try to be doing is tapping into the same force, the same energy, the same underlying tension, the friction that exists and always has existed. You don't want to be walking into a forest covered in peanut butter. What you're doing is you're just going for a walk. You're watching people carry on their conversations. You're watching a squirrel play in the park. And then you're watching people glare at you. Maybe based on the way you're dressed, or the way your ego decides to present itself in certain conversations that you might have to someone. And you're understanding that you may be the subject of that which intends for you or against you. You start to dilute your mind when you adhere strictly to someone else's schematic of reasoning. Or should I say, concentrate your ego's intention on too narrow a bandwidth. So I don't want to get confused or confuse you between, I don't want to, because when I talk about the broad path or the wide path, I'm not implying that walking the narrow path is a bad thing, or whatever way you want to perceive that. It's like talking about apples and oranges. It's, some things apply for some certain forms of understanding, and other things apply for other forms of understanding. The narrow path is what you want to get away from.